I've had the privilege of working with leaders who have literally enabled countries to make a massive transformation. So I had a boss, his name was Michael Cassidy, led a large organization in South Africa, and he was very instrumental in helping the people that we know about, like Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Desmond Tutu and former President F.W. de Klerk, working with these folk very much behind the scenes to enable a transition to take place. One of the things that I learned from him, but also from his stories of all these amazing people that he knew and knew well, is that leadership that is going to make a difference, that kind of leader has to be willing to go the distance. And I mean decades. It's almost a boring cliche that every company is chasing after innovation, wants to be an innovative company, but it obviously is a good thing. And to achieve it, you need a critical ingredient, which is difference. You need difference of perspectives, difference of intuitions that people bring to the table, difference of skills, insights, and so on. The problem with that is that difference is a setup for conflict, and which is probably the more common experience that organizations have when they're trying to collaborate or innovate around something. The work that I did in South Africa in political mediation, and it was in situations where you had warlords, you had grassroots politicians, you had national level politicians. Their involvement was more behind the scenes, pulling the strings, but they were all somehow involved in stuff that was happening on the ground, where people's conviction was if we're going to succeed, it requires the other people to lose, bottom line. And the work we did was really about helping them, learning to discover the humanity in each other and to begin those early steps of trusting. And it's amazing what happens with people who have such different perspectives come together. Our organization did work like this that resulted in South Africa's interim constitution being drafted and being praised for what it had in it that enabled the country to transition out of its apartheid situation into democracy. That's what happens when you put difference in the same room and it knows how to get along. So when a company wants to have that, it needs to hire for difference, and yet on top of that, it needs to deliberately invest in building a culture of trust. And if you put those two things together, you can get phenomenal creativity. One of the critical things to understand about trust is it's not just about performance, which we all understand. Well, I trust you because you're reliable, or you do things on time, or you do a good job. A huge component of trust is, or let me put it in negative terms, say of distrust, is that I don't understand you. I don't get why you do what you do, or why you do things the way you do them. And a trust-building process has to address that. People have to start to learn about each other's cultures and personality types, and in particular, and this applies not only in a team, but in a multi-stakeholder environment where there's multiple partnerships, multiple organizations, is learning that, well, we may be in this for a similar objective, but we have different outcomes that each of us desire. Each of us desires a different return on investment. And if I understand that about you, and you understand it about me, we're probably not going to compete so much as collaborate. Because we realize we're actually after different things in terms of our personal gain, but the same thing in terms of what we're going to build together. A significant barrier to effective leadership, when you're actually in the flow and on the job, is an unnecessary sense of urgency. And that can get in the way of the kind of thinking, the kind of planning, the kind of reflection that makes leaders very effective. One of the myths around leadership is that good leaders are these amazing communicators. They have phenomenal presentation skills and they have tremendous charisma. Well, study after study after study shows that those don't automatically correlate with effective leadership. And being able to communicate vision or passion, it is important, but there's another dimension of communication that is actually far more important and that a leader should be spending more of their time attending to. And that is a culture of communication within an organization, that people willingly communicate with each other, they willingly pass information on to each other. That requires trust, among other things. About 3 years ago, Stanford University released a study that they had done on successful strategy execution. Well, the statistics on executing a project of any kind are not good. They're traditionally a failure rate of, there's typically a failure rate of about 80%. And so they were looking for the 20%. Who are the companies that were successfully executing strategy? And what they found were two critical ingredients in those companies that were there. These companies could actually have a relatively poor structure, not well designed. But because there were clear decision-making rights, everybody knew exactly what their role was and the kinds of decisions they were responsible for making. And because there was an unblocked flow of information, in other words, the communication channels were open. It meant you could have all kinds of information coming across your desk, but you knew what to do with it because of your clear decision-making rights. You knew how to filter it and then act on it. Those are the two sort of critical ingredients to communication, enabling an organization to effectively execute its strategy. For your team to have autonomy is critical, but of course, giving that autonomy to them can be frightening. So what do you do about that? Well, first I would just encourage the leader, get over that fear, because you're going to actually see it's remarkable what happens when they have that autonomy. But to compensate for your fear, here's some other things that I think are actually necessary. One is, well, they're both about holding people accountable. You're giving them the freedom to utilize their creativity and their ability in ways that they would like, but they're being held accountable to the culture of your organization, how you go about doing business, how you serve customers, the way you treat people. You hold them accountable to that, to conduct, to standards. And then secondly, you're holding them accountable to the objectives, to achieving things. And if you're setting reasonable deadlines and there's very clear guidance as to that's what we want you to pull off, everything else is up to you. People can fail in between, but still fix things and achieve an amazing outcome. And they'll have invested tremendous amount of energy and creativity to do so. And your company will definitely benefit from that. Coaching is very important to the development of leaders in your organization. The thing that an organization needs to understand about it is that it's a specialist role. It's like in sports. You wouldn't hire anybody to be a coach just because somebody was a star athlete. Doesn't mean that they're going to be an effective coach. An effective coach knows how people learn, knows how to watch for people's limits, and not push them too hard. I sustained a permanent injury once from a coach who just kept pushing me because he was basically a teenager who had no experience. On the other hand, something that any leader can be involved in that leadership development process in an organization is mentoring. And mentoring, in many ways, is simply allowing people access to your world as a leader. So there's three aspects to a leader allowing somebody into their world to learn from them as a mentor. And the first is allowing people to see what they do. Bringing people alongside you as you undertake a project or to meetings or whatever. People need to just watch and be allowed to see what you do. But the thing that's more challenging, the second one, is to allow people to hear what you're thinking. That can be a bit challenging, but obviously with some discretion exercised, a leader needs to be transparent to his or her mentorees about what they're thinking. And it doesn't matter if one day their thoughts were over here and the next day they're actually starting to change their mind. That's part of leadership, is wrestling things through. People need to see that. And then the third thing is telling stories from your past experience. I have learned a tremendous amount about leadership that I actually use today in my own work because of seasoned leaders just telling me stories. And they didn't think they were mentoring me, but they were. The authentic leader is a leader who's leading out of that crucible of tested, proven values, principles, things that they've learned and developed over time. Many leaders, or many people, all of us, are easily swayed by what other people think. And the worst a leader can do is attempt to imitate somebody else's leadership style or ability. The best a leader has to offer to anybody is what he or she has within himself. That's all. Their strength flows out of that place. If you open any one of 100 popular business books, the average introduction has something to say about the nature of our times and how everything changes really, really rapidly. And so a leader has to be adaptable. Well, how adaptable can the human being ultimately be? There's only so much change one can adapt to or be nimble about, or so much information that one can process at a given time. We are finite beings. And I think the real secret to surviving change and actually leading through change is when a leader knows deeply what he or she stands for. Whatever gets thrown at you in a changing world can be filtered through knowing what you believe in. And all of that comes out of leaders who know why they're there, who know what they believe in, who know what they're after, and stay the course. Friedrich Nietzsche, a philosopher that I personally don't put a lot of stock in, but he had one thing to say which I think is critical for leaders, and that is that anything worthwhile that's going to last requires a long obedience in the same direction. And I think that is good medicine for every leader, and to commit to a long obedience to what they know matters in the same direction, and they will see the results, even if it takes years.